All right, shall we get started?
Yes, let's get started. Sorry. Hello, everyone, and welcome back.
Was that your separate voice?
This is my pretending to be a YouTuber voice.
Yes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to
Catharsis.
This is an episode of Catching Up with Catharsis, starring me, Marina, your dungeon master.
And me, and Jillian, the lore keeper.
And Mary Jo,
Hi.
Also a lore keeper.
No.
No?
Lore copier.
Lore copier.
Lore copy editor.
I'm the reason we record the lore, honestly. Because if not, I would have no idea what was going on at all, at any time. So
I just want to say, for the record, because people who don't, who are not in our immediate group probably don't realize like how extensive the notes are. We have a wiki that these two crazies made on their own volition. I was in Florida and I got the text that they made a Wikipedia. Like
And then my notes, granted my notes tend to be very detailed because I'm like, if we do the inevitable book adaptation, I want to make sure that we have these whole passages.
Yeah, which we could probably make a lot of books right now.
Well, here's the thing, is that my notes currently tally up to over 200 pages across both books.
Yes. And I feel like if we were to release it into book form, there would have to be two versions. One is the version where it would be a mix of your notes and my notes, where it's primarily like through the Dungeon Master's perspective, and then the other version, which is like Lilith perspective, where it's like more heavily into the romance between Lilith and Atticus and her inner turmoil.
Why are you? This will all make sense to you as we go through book one. I promise.
I love that version.
To be honest, I have several headcanons for how her story will end, like post game, and one of them is like when she's in her 70s, she'll publish her memoirs, and it'll be basically my notes.
The Ballad of Lilith.
Yes.
You look like you had something you were going to say.
Ellie and Archive get married and they're so happy.
Yes.
And I'm happy for them.
They have such a good time.
They make a child with science because neither of them want to actually do anything.
And they're like, you want a child? Yeah. Do you want to work for... No. Me neither. Okay. Do we want to just...
Science.
Yep. So... Getting into this, what we're essentially going to do is I have up our Catharsis wiki, and I'm going to be reading / like sort of abbreviating the notes that Mary Jo very kindly put on the Wikipedia, and we're going to be stopping occasionally to add in our own anecdotes. This is to help people who haven't played with us or don't know the story after session 1, a second chance. There are 2 books. I'm hoping there will be 5. We've already started recording, as of this recording, book 3. We are 2 chapters into book 3. Book 1 is called Sprouting. You will notice the theme as we go on.
It's plants.
It's plants. It's the curse.
It's the curse. So we're gonna pretend like we're explaining this for the first time to anyone, because that's exactly what we're doing. Hopefully we won't make assumptions that you know things, and if we confuse you, we'll leave a comment.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna start with chapter 2, The Girl in the Apple Crate. On a god's night, a young tiefling girl and a cloaked man rush through the streets. I want to make one edit to this. It is technically through the castle. And that is important, because if they were through the streets, they would not have gotten as far as they did.
True.
They are going through this castle. The man attempts to calm the girl, who is very distressed. But there is a dragon in pursuit. Hot pursuit. The dragon swoops in towards them, coming down the hallway. The man grabs the girl and says to himself the phrase, "eyes unclouded." That will become important later.
It's a motif.
It's a motif that will be reoccurring.
Put a pin in it.
He casts the spell, I believe it's either levitate or gust, and they lift off and fly through the air. They land and they run. Now they're in the streets. And this is where things got spooky.
Yes.
That is when the Golden Afternoon Witches arrive. And we have not met these characters before. My players were like, what the fuck is going on? But these witches are a group of women all donning like different colored cloaks with different flower motifs on them. And they were sort of cackling evilly as you would imagine a stereotypical witch to do. The man uses a spell to float the little tiefling girl over the gate, sacrificing himself to fight the witches off, and tells the girl to run, and that he'll catch up to her. He then, in a drama, casts Fireball, and we don't see what happens.
That's the first hint. He's quite powerful. The second hint, for those of you who might be eagle-eyed, or in this case eagle-eared, since this is a podcast, might notice that his phrase "eyes unclouded" is something that Lilith said to herself in session 1. That will be important later. Good bit of foreshadowing.
Does she say it in session 1?
I believe she does.
Also, I apologize for my ice. So, then we got to our player characters. Yay! And we are coming back to that same night, same time. Lilith is just remaking her pact with Zephyr, inducing a flashback of her childhood.
Yep.
A young Lilith meets a bandaged man playing the piano in a temple of the god Fultus. Lilith expresses her pleasure at hearing the music and other than hymns, which is what she's used to. She's used to church music. After a brief discussion, the vision ends with the bandages becoming butterflies. And it is understood that this was Lilith's first time meeting Zephyr, as he posed as a blind piano tutor.
Yep. A couple of things to note here. Those of you who are more familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, and specifically the Greyhawk Pantheon, will probably recognize the name Fultus as being the god of law and light. When coming up with the character of Lilith and the fact that she would be an Aasimar, I talked with Marina about potential gods for her to be associated with, and after doing a bit of research, Fultus fit perfectly with my idea of Lilith being raised in a very oppressive Catholic-style church. Marina then ended up changing a lot of details about Fultus, so that some elements of him still remain, but in other ways, he's basically just Fultus in name only.
Yeah, when it comes to the original D&D canon for gods, I see them, to quote Pirates of the Caribbean, they're more like guidelines than actual rules. So I think you can see that in other D&D podcasts where, you take these big gothic characters like the Raven Queen and you repurpose them to fit like your vibe in your universe. And I really, even now, there are things that our players don't know about Fultus that I do. That is kind of why I've changed Fultus to be the way he appears in the game, which is not how he is in canon D&D, just as we would never probably use the canon drow lore, God forbid, right, Mary Jo? Mary's face.
Yeah, I don't know how...
You don't know Gilead's life.
That's true. We don't know. We don't know.
The other thing, and I don't want to get on too many tangents, but this idea of Zephyr essentially, I don't want to say grooming Lilith, but kind of like
grooming Lilith. I will say it. I'm the DM. Grooming Lilith. Not in a way that is like, I don't think at first it intended to be sexual or romantic. I think it was grooming her for, being the figurehead of what he wanted to happen.
Grooming her for greatness. But this caught everyone off guard because from session 1, Zephyr had this kind of weird tension with her. And even during the character conception process, Rita very briefly asked me like, hey, do you want your Archfey patron to be your romantic interest?
Because if I'm being honest, if I was a player and I had an Archfey patron, I would want him to have a crush on me, whether or not it was reciprocated.
And I said, you know what? I like the idea of him having a crush on me, but I don't want it to be reciprocated because I don't like the unbalanced power dynamic. I think that's kind of weird.
And I am also for that because I love turning the trope on its head. I feel like if this was any other narrative, you know, we would lean into that and go all like dark romance girly.
We'll get into how they subvert various tropes later.
Yeah.
Back to the summary.
So the vision fades and Zephyr kisses Lilith's hand and gives her a letter before bursting into a swarm of butterflies. He tells her he can't read this letter until, oh god, what was the stipulation?
I think you told me the stipulation outside of the game, but...
It was until he said so.
Until he said so, yeah.
He's like, you can't read this until I say so. Lilith returns to her companions at the Toadstool Inn. The inhabitants of the village, including frog and toad folk, mushroom folk, elves, humans, and others, wake up and set up shop for the morning market. The PCs split up and peruse the market and the town, particularly Ellie, who wishes to see her old house because Ellie used to live in Mosswood. That's another thing we have to remember is that these characters have been dead for like 80 years.
With the exception of Paris, who's only been dead for, I think, 1.5?
1.5, exactly. And so Paris is kind of like their guide. And I told Zoe out the gate, you're gonna have to be like their guide into the newer world. So you're the hip one leading all the old ladies along.
Especially with technology and whatnot, and that does come up later.
Yes. Lilith and Gwilla make their way to Silks and Such, a tailor manned by a half-elf with Asian features and a large jumping spider. This man, his name is Toshiro. And Lilith realizes that this man used to be known as Silk Moth when he was in her group, known as Metamorphosis, with Zephyr as their joint patron.
Is it metamorphosis or metamorphosis?
That's a good question. I get it confused all the time.
The actual word is metamorphosis.
I knew that.
But on the wiki and in all the stuff you've made, it's always been metamorphosis.
I'm sorry.
So I always assumed it was a stylistic choice, not a typo.
I don't want to
just
sound.
Say yeah.
I
just
don't want to sound insensitive, but I didn't care that much to make the difference because everybody knew what I was talking about.
Right.
Sorry.
I thought it was on purpose.
I also did too.
Sure. You guys give me way too much credit.
Mm-hmm.
So, Silk Moth Toshiro is very happy to see Lilith. There's a brief memory moment where Lilith remembers Toshiro making her costumes for the show and also being her confidant. He says that he is no longer in a pact with Zephyr, but he was there for the revolution. Willa, who is also here, we might have forgotten that for a moment,
right,
watches all of this respectfully. He feels in Lilith what transpired after her death. He explains that Lilith defended what he thought was a drow girl from a Kingsguard assault and was struck down. Metamorphosis grew more overzealous in their efforts after the death of Lilith and her becoming sort of this martyr figure. And they killed many in Lilith's name, targeting the king directly, the King of Hollows. Zephyr got involved as much as he was allowed to, being the Archfey. And
ultimately it was the queen whose actions caused the most harm to him in Catharsis itself.
yes.
And then Toshiro quit.
Yeah, Toshiro was like, I'm out.
He rage quit.
He doesn't really care what happens next. But Lilith maybe inspires hope in him. So does Gwilla.
Yes. And I believe there was a very nice conversation about that. And
there was.
He gives Gwilla this sort of wrap scarf that I think she still has.
She still does.
Paris and Ellie, meanwhile, are going to the fruit stand called Organza Organics. And upon seeing a missing poster with Julia's face on it, they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, that hurt. As a player, I know after the fact Marina told us that Julia was meant to be just a single one-shot character. She dies and then never shows up again.
Yeah, she was like, I didn't know you guys, because
we latched.
We latched on hard.
And I'm so happy that you did.
But we were all very sad at the table when she added that little detail. It's like, oh yeah, there's a missing poster. They've been looking for her. And then we have to be like, great, she's dead. And we have to break this news. Or I think it was Paris and Ellie had to break that news to the parents.
Yes, and they did, bringing Julia's bag. The couple wept, listened to Ellie's explanation of how it ended up in the party's possession. Paris tells them that Julia helped the party when no one else would. And how she wished the party good morning as she woke them one by one. The women, her parents were lesbians, excuse themselves so they can properly grieve and hang a "Be Right Back" sign written in a child's handwriting, because I'm mean. And a raven flies over to them and croaks, "All is well," and coughed up 3 white memory marbles. What are those?
Who knows?
What are those?
We'll find out later.
Cracks.
The party meets up to swap stories. Ellie teaches Glilla druid craft. We specifically did that because Mallory really wanted druid craft.
And it also fit her character absolutely perfectly.
It does. It wasn't her original class. Her original class was sorcerer, but it does fit, and I thought it made for a great character moment. Then they headed for a stand called Jarred Joys, and this shop is occupying part of Ellie's old house. She peeks inside and sees that there's a mushroom family with some young children in there. In my brain, I see it as 6. I think there's a lot of mushroom kids. There is a furbolg also managing the storefront and notices and asks Ellie what her connection to the place is. She explains that she's of the Aster bloodline. The patriarch of the mushroom family goes inside to retrieve a box that belonged to Ellie's father. The contents include his will, deeds to the family home in Mosswood, and an estate in Catharsis City. Oh, I almost forgot about that. Holy shit.
Good thing we have notes.
A blood-stained family portrait, her mother's signet ring, belonging to the Aster bloodline, and a stuffed hedgehog toy, as well as her father's astronomy equipment.
Which Ellie is interested in most of all.
Yes. Ellie reminisces about stargazing with her father. Lime green sprites resembling puffballs gather at her and Willa's feet, and the furbolg states that he's a zoologist investigating the creatures who came to be since the curse was cast. Sort of like how, if you're thinking about Fallout in that sort of like nuclear setting, how monsters and creatures sort of come to be from other beings because of this like new radiation or whatever. The curse is, in its way, sort of radioactive, but magically.
And he introduces himself as Watts.
Oh yes, his name is Watsonberg, Watts for short. He asks Ellie what she wants to name the creatures, and she's like, I don't know. And he's like, how about we name them Asters? And she's like, sure. Ellie notices Willa is upset and asks if she's alright, to which she says, I will be someday. They swap stories of their fathers and the traumatic loss. Willa worries that she will hurt people with her stone body, but Ellie gives her a hug to prove to her that she won't hurt anyone. 2 noble women in cloaks bump into the pair and sneer at Willa. Ellie snaps at them, but when the woman looks back, she finds herself face to face with the Golden Afternoon Witches. Bum, bum, bum.
Before we, I feel like we should mention, just because it's kind of funny, like, piece of extra information.
Do it.
Watsonberg was originally meant to be Ellie's love interest.
Yes, he
Yes.
was.
So we decided that Watsonberg was definitely Mary flavored, but was not Ellie flavored, which is kind of funny.
It is an interesting lesson for a dungeon master when you try to create a love interest that your players will enjoy, but you have to keep in mind that there's a difference between what your players would want to romance and what their characters would want to romance. Those can be 2 different things. Here's another thing about when you play with me. Welcome to my dating sim.
Yep.
I give everyone a love interest as long as they want one.
Let's face it, who doesn't?
I mostly do because if I was a player, I would want a love interest.
Yeah.
Like, hell yeah. You know, as long as you don't take it too fucking far. I think with our group, we know.
Fucking far.
But I think with our group, we know our boundaries.
We do.
You know, it's like, and they made out. Fade to black.
And if you want to write spicy stuff about them after the fact, do it in your own spare time. Don't share with the group.
Don't share with the group.
No tonsil hockey.
But
Whatever.
anyhow, Ellie casts Levitate in response, inspired by the courage of her friend Willa, who casts Earthbind to trip the woman's companion.
There's two witches, and so one of them gets levitated, and then one of them is tripped by Earthbind.
Yes.
And then
Paris and
Yeah.
Lilith remain oblivious to this commotion. They're focused squarely on the fountain of the moon goddess Selene. So this is another god in the pantheon of Catharsis. They bond over their misgivings of organized religion and how Paris's father was a fan of Lilith's music. Because, you know, there's the 80-year gap. A nun at the fountain introduces herself as Sister Abriel. Sister Abriel becomes an important NPC later. She explains that Selene is merciful and a caring goddess, and that she's the best one.
she helped Gabriel escape an abusive childhood, and through Selene, she found her new family, and she's devoted her life to this goddess.
Yes.
She will proselytize about Selene every chance she gets, and she absolutely does. And sometimes she very much succeeds.
Now, we don't know for sure if so. Well, I know for sure, but the players don't know for sure, like, what if they should be trusting Selene or not. But what they do know is that Sister Abriel is drinking the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's a good goddess or not, Sister Abriel is like all about that Selene life. Paris agrees wholeheartly about the sentiment, but doesn't elaborate further
About found family.
about found family. In a display of generosity, Paris donates the squash that they purchased
From Julia's
from
parents.
Julia's parents to Abriel's cause and deflects her blessing. Celine's not watching over me, but okay. Lilith finds herself compelled to donate to Abriel, and when Abriel tells her that the core intent of worshipping Selene is believing a star to come will liberate the people from Fultus's heavy hand.
And that's when Lilith just says, fuck Fultus. Fuck him. And then she manages to convince sweet goody two-shoe cinnamon Abriel to say, yeah, fuck Fultus. And laughter was had.
Willa and Ellie reunite with Paris and Lilith at the fountain just as a trumpet sounds. The Frogfolk mayor delivers a speech expressing concern over the recent disappearances in town. He urges the townsfolk to not under any circumstances approach the amphitheater and its singing Phantom Hive.
Found the plot.
As the party ruminates over the speech, Paris reveals that a Phantom Hive likely consists of souls of the massacred drow, whose bodies were mutilated beyond recognition and burned in a mass grave at the theater. Willa refuses to enter the amphitheater, and Ellie remains silent. Without warning, Julia's parents emerge from their home with a crate in their hands, and a young tiefling girl stumbles out. Just as the witches spot her, they both dash towards the girl, and that's the end of chapter 2.
So next up is chapter 3, Wrath of Witches. So we have two witches staggering up the stairs of Catharsis Castle, who are very eager to report to the Morning Queen that the wizard named Mausolith has been apprehended. And yet the Morning Queen remains unimpressed, for the witches failed at their most critical task, which was retrieving her daughter May. The Queen then shows that she's quite aggressive when she's angry, throws her wine glass at one of the witches, and the shards slice through her delicate skin. She then grabs her in a chokehold and says, I've lost enough in this wretched life. Do better and find my daughter, or else.
This is our big bad, ladies and gentlemen.
The witch then drops to the floor in a heap, and then she and the witch fly through. Those same witches are Rachel and Harini, and they find themselves face to face with the party. Their eyes lock on the young tiefling girl tumbling out of an apple crate. Ellie scoops her up, and they run. Rachel's body contorts as if she's about to sprint on all fours. I'm picturing, for those of you who've seen Devilman Crybaby, I'm picturing all these scenes of the track runners, which are just the most deranged running animations you've ever seen. They're very beastly and monstrous.
Ooh.
Very fun.
I am not familiar, but that sounds good.
It's one of those anime that like you watch once and then you never want to see again because it's so depressing, but also it's so good.
I understand.
Anyway, the party moves even faster. They go to Ellie's home, and God bless the mushroom folk, they help out as best they can.
Yeah, they're trying to throw furniture at these witches and trying to break them up. This is also, and just as a side note, when Watsonberg wasn't ready for this little act of unfortunate fate. What the players did not know yet.
Is that when he was cursed?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
Know that?
No!
Oh.
And I feel like a failure as a lore keeper for not realizing that.
I don't know. Maybe that was a Watsonberg Ellie thing that Marina and I talked about outside of.
Oh, maybe. I'm not sure.
Because Ellie felt really, really guilty about it, and that is why she was so attached to him later.
Right. That makes sense.
I don't remember anything.
Essentially, this very eccentric zookeeper man contracted the curse when the witches passed by. The curse is sort of infectious. It's very
It's spore-based.
It's spore-based. It's not guaranteed you're going to get it, but after 5 days, you know for sure.
Because you're dead.
Because you become a zombie person with flowers coming out of your face. Anyway,
so they run through, and then they see a train and shops, and Ellie is like, what is happening here? I don't recognize any of this. And the party's like, let's go. We gotta hop on this train with this tiefling girl. And they're darting in between luggage and passengers dressed in their Sunday best. And then the tiefling girl signs thank you because she's mute. And thankfully all the party know ASL.
Yes, that's something in this universe. Everyone knows ASL because it's so common with races like the mushroom folk.
I don't know if we should be calling it ASL.
Yeah, would it be because ASL is specific for American?
Just say sign language.
Oh, okay. I guess just sign language.
Yeah.
My bad.
And at that point, the tiefling introduces herself as May. As in May, the queen's daughter. The party doesn't realize this yet, of course. At that point, there's an announcement on the loudspeaker saying that there have been a bunch of runaways and the train will be delayed so they can be properly dealt with. The party uses magic and their resources to obscure their appearances. And then,
there seems to be a sleeping girl in the cart that they're in already. And she's just there.
A teenage girl in a purple cloak holding a massive magical tome. The girl glares at the witch when, so there's a witch who's holding the conductor hostage, and then another witch, or maybe it's the same witch, and try to interrogate the occupants. The girl glares at the witch and denies that May is in the car, to the party's shock and relief. And as the witch turns away in a huff, the girl, Beatrice, snarkily introduces herself to the party, notes they look pretty damn good for dead people, and explains that she's an old friend of May. The tiefling doesn't believe her until she sings a very childish song about lambs, and the two hug. And then Beatrice uses a disguise spell on May, and they go off to see the Chip Cup, which is where many of her friends and allies, especially her older sister, are currently hanging out at.
Yes.
Why was Beatrice on the train?
Should I say why?
Is it spoilery for us?
You're gonna find out in the next chapter.
Okay.
Basically, you delayed a trip that was probably for the best.
Good to know.
And she decided not to take that trip after all, after the events of what is about to transpire.
Interesting. So we cut back to the scene, and Gwilla notices that there's a very conspicuous large green bloodstain that seeps through Beatrice's coat. And she realizes that the cloak belonged to her adopted father, Mausolith, and she pleads with Beatrice to let her have it. The younger woman refuses, but just as things are about to go south, a pale and cheery human woman emerges from the Chip Cup's back entrance.
Ta-da!
Paris recognizes some of the woman's features, And this woman recognizes the halfling, but something about her is different from what Paris remembers. This woman is named Claire. She works at the Chipped Cup. She was a friend of Paris. And the party learns that Claire died at some point. I'm assuming, was it before or after Paris died?
It was after Paris died.
Okay. And she was brought back to life with Beatrice's necromancy magic. Claire is like, whatever, I'm just glad to be back.
I look pale now and I have white hair, but it's fine.
And then she coaxes Beatrice to give Gwilla the cloak. And I think, is this at one point, does Gwilla realize that the coat is stained with her blood?
I think...
Is that a later session?
That's a later session.
Okay. And then Claire's like, oh my god, it's Lilith Blackwood. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm meeting my idol. I'm your biggest fan. I have pins. I've got flair on my... I've got all the flair on my uniform.
On my apron, because I work at a cafe.
And at that point, they enter the cafe and they pass a muscular green fire elemental chef who is very handsome, named Wick. And at Autumn, a Ladrin waitress covered in tattoos named Maggie. They catch Gwilla and Paris' eye, respectively. So Gwilla's like, ooh, this Wick guy looks kind of cute. And Paris is like, yeah.
That Maggie's kind of hot.
I like Maggie. She's cute, too. But Beatrice and Claire usher them out of the kitchen before any serious flirting can happen. A black cat with one eye named Catastrophe lands in Beatrice's lap as the party sits down for tea. Paris shamelessly flirts with Maggie. And then Beatrice discusses Claire's situation, which, do you want to kind of describe that?
Yes. So they are descended from one of the noble houses, the House of Wisteria. It is a bloodline that specializes in necromancy magic. Now, technically, they are witches. And just as are Rachel and Harini, the witches that work for the queen, the bad guys. However, Beatrice and Claire are not part of those guys. They sort of broke off. Beatrice was supposed to become one of them by force. Their mother sort of pushed it to happen. And then before the pact could be sealed and Beatrice could become one with the coven, Claire interceded, and that is how Claire perished.
And thank God she did, because we finally got to see, well, the party didn't, but us players got to see what a witch coven pact is at the end of session 2. And yeah, that was friggin' terrifying.
Yes.
It was not fun. So then Ellie shows the sisters her Aster signet ring because she's like, oh yeah, I'm descended from nobility too. And they kind of freak out because they say that the Morning Queen is a member of House Aster. They also realize that by extension, since May is the daughter of the Morning Queen, she is somehow related to Ellie.
Mm-hmm. We don't know what relation at this point yet.
Beatrice then breaks the tension by explaining that she and Claire believe their grandfather had a hand in casting the curse in Catharsis, and that the way to lift it might be found in the estate's library. They invite the party to meet them there in the evening, and with that the party prepares to leave the Chipped Cup. Wick watches Gwilla with great interest as the party leaves, and is even more intrigued when her disguise spell wears off to reveal her stone body.
Before, she was wearing a disguise from the train, where she looked like her more fleshy Earth Genasi self, rather than the statue version we now know her as.
Yep. And I will just read this part verbatim because this is hilarious, at least to me. The two share a sweet look, but the rest of the party has already left, Paris leading them toward the smithy with a gleam in their eyes. They watch the rippling muscles of the orc shopkeep catch the light just so as she puts away her wares, and Paris saunters up to her with a request to sharpen their sword. Lilith grows so tired of the double entendres and bedroom eyes that she pays through reforging herself to put an end to it, and the orc's colleague Burst, who I think you described as an angry fire twink.
Yep.
Yep, he's Wick's brother, storms off with the sword in a fiery huff. Yet the orc, named Kay, could care less. She only has eyes for Paris, and the two vow to meet up at the inn to get to know each other better, so to speak. As the party shakes their heads, Gwilla smirks and whispers a single word into Paris's ear. Nice.
Is that the end of that chapter?
Yes, and I will request if I can read this one too, because this is a very Lilith-centered chapter.
You may.
Okay. I apologize in advance. You probably won't see me blushing or giggling, but I might, because it is that chapter.
Oh, actually, if it's that chapter, can I read it because I want to explain memory marbles?
True.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. I'll just comment.
This is chapter 4, A Market for Memories. The session begins with a flashback of the king shouting and waking the queen mother, who is on her deathbed. The morning queen sits beside her, sort of bragging, I guess.
Yeah. I have here, it's not easy being a mother, is it? Is what she says, and the queen mother's eyes are full of regret, but she cannot bring herself to be honest with her daughter-in-law, especially since it's her curse that forced her to endure such a wretched existence.
The queen mother is disappointed in her, and her granddaughter deserves better, aka May, but does not state it outright. Harini bursts through the door and reports that Lilith has escaped with May. So we realize that this was as Lilith and May were escaping the dragon way back in chapter 2. It is explained that this was the Queen Mother's plan all along, that Lilith poisoned her drink to help her die and escape the curse once and for all, and escaped with May to fulfill her final wish of giving her granddaughter a better life.
And then I'll just quote my notes here directly. As the mourning queen screams for her daughter, death approaches. Finally, I thought I'd never see you. Let's get on with it, shall we? And as the queen mother draws her final breath, a sunflower sprouts from her ashen face.
The scene cuts to the PCs as they leave May, Beatrice, and Claire at the Chipped Cup and make their way to the steam-powered Snapdragon, where they are immediately spotted by a goblin woman named Greeks.
Who then says, holy fuckity fuck, Paris Cindervale, who then leaps over the table and engulfs Paris in a spinning hug. And at that point, she rushes to fetch her extremely handsome colleague and friend, Atticus Snapdragon. He is a changeling. He does not bother to hide that fact whatsoever, which is a bit of a rarity in this world. And his polite and reserved demeanor breaks as soon as he sees Paris. And Lilith's like, yeah, he's hot.
Atticus explains to Paris that their family may still be alive after the attack, quote unquote. The party looks around the shop and Ellie spots a stuffed lamb. She asks to purchase it for a friend named May. Atticus agrees, though admits that the toy has some sentimental value to him, and explains the daughter of an old friend was also called May.
And then Lilith connects the dots and is like, wait, I think you're talking about the same person.
And Lilith, yes, realizes that Atticus is close to Beatrice and was once romantically involved with Claire. He knows May as well and has some sort of connection to the Morning Queen. Atticus asks if there's any of the party
more notable figures, because he's like,
yeah,
because he's just shocked that 3 of them died 80 years ago. Long before he was born.
And Lilith tells him that she was the figurehead of Metamorphosis.
Ta-da!
Both the band and the revolutionary movement. Lilith expresses her pleasure that he has never heard of her before, and it's refreshing to not have random people gushing over her for once, like Claire.
Yep.
But before they depart, Atticus gives Willa an apparatus to help her stay hydrated.
Atticus sends him off with a bow. He and Lil share a very sweet and cute moment. And I think I was blushing so hard when playing. I was like, Lilith was like, yes. And me as a player as a person was also like, yes.
And I was like, yes, I got her type.
Yes. Nailed it in one go.
A raven perched on a lamppost greets the party as they exit the Snapdragon shop. And they follow it into an alleyway because they've learned at this point that ravens are very much tied to the Raven Queen, aka Death. And it caused Market of Memories over here as it coughs up a stick of chalk and flies away. Willow follows the raven's instructions and draws a door on the alleyway wall, and they enter this sort of Ghibli-style door, and inside is a shop that wasn't originally there. It is the Market of Memories, full of discarded and lost things. The dog speaks and changes into a cat, a wolf, and finally a handsome African-American man.
With sharp canines and an abundance of piercings.
He introduces himself as Sammy Bryan, an archfey and vendor of memory marbles like the ones that the party has in possession. To demonstrate their power, he asks one of the party members to pose a question to a white marble.
And Lilith's just like, yes, pick me, pick me, pick me. And at that point, the room goes white. And in the blink of an eye, the party and Sammy find themselves in the backstage area of Lilith's favorite concert hall to perform in. There are flyers everywhere with her face and Revenge for Lilith, Death to the King littering the floor. And Toshiro mournfully picks one of them up and realizes that Lilith did not want this at all. At that point, a green glow emanates from his patron mark, and here comes our favorite problematic archfey, Zephyr. Everyone but Lilith is like, who is this guy? We don't like him. He gives off creeper vibes.
And they're right.
He is absolutely right. They are absolutely right. Zephyr is very flirty and predatory with Toshiro, and then he deflects each and every one of Zephyr's advances. And Toshiro confronts Zephyr about the fact that he's basically pursuing his own agenda using Lilith's name. Lilith isn't a fan of the fact that these two men, both of whom she trusted, are kind of manipulating her own legacy. She feels a little weird about that.
Yeah, they both have their own interpretation of what you wanted without you being present.
Yep.
You're literally deceased.
And Toshiro says, yeah, my contract is void. I'm breaking my pact. Zephyr grabs Toshiro and rips a bolt of arcane energy out of his chest. I have a note here that says that Zephyr moans in ecstasy as the magic sinks into his body, mocking and flirting with the man doubled over in agony. As the patron mark vanishes from Toshiro's body, a tornado of butterflies and hideous laughter whisks Zephyr away to planes unknown. In any case, the secret is out, cat's out of the bag, or butterflies out of the bag in this case, and Lilith has to tell the party that, yeah, she's a warlock. Surprise!
And that was her bitch boy patron.
No, is her bitch boy patron. They're still together.
That's true, they're still together. So that happened, and now the party leaves the shop and goes to the Wisteria Forest. The Wisteria Forest is magically cloaks this manor, the Wisteria Manor. So Beatrice and Claire are the only ones who can lead the way because they are the witches of the manor. Ellie's arm reacts to the magical energy because wound tree stuff, and Willa remembers playing in this forest as a child. As night falls, Harini and Rachel appear behind them and a battle ensues. Harini is the first casualty. However, an opium poppy bursts from her corpse and another Harini appears, one a little more grotesque and ugly. Paris realizes that the witches are not bound to normal rules of being undead. The party dispatches of the Harini copy rather quickly, which also sprouts a poppy, but not another duplicate. Rachel, the remaining witch, retreats with the flower on her broomstick. They rendezvous, and as Rachel leaves, a knight in obsidian armor comes out of the mist of the Wisteria Forest and goes, "Did I miss it?" And the party's like, "Yeah, it's kind of over. Who are you?" And the knight takes off her helmet, and it is Claire. And she goes, "Dang it, I wanted to help." And that's where we ended that session.
Before we launch into the next session, which will be a quarter of the way through, which is awesome. For those who want a visual of what Claire's armor looks like, you know the Pokemon Ceruledge? That's basically it.
Don't call me out like that.
No, it's fine. Ceruledge is also one of my favorite Pokemon, especially from Gen 9.
It's true. It's true.
Honestly, gorgeous.
Such a great character.